The 360 on Energy and Carbon, hosted by 360 Energy. Gerald J. Leonard offers a unique productivity approach to accomplishing more every day. Gerald J. Leonard, PMP, PFMP, and CIQ coach. He's a publishing editor, CEO, and founder of the Leonard Productivity Intelligence Institute, as well as the CEO of Turnberry Premiere, a strategic project portfolio management and IT governance firm based in Washington, D.C. Gerald is also an author, TEDx speaker, management guru, and importantly, a bass player. He brings all these traits and skills into his presentation and interviews. Now let's get into the episode with Gerald. Welcome back, Dave and John.
Great to be back. Really looking forward to today.
The week is just flown by, and again, another exciting podcast guest.
Agreed. So today we're joined by Gerald Leonard, CEO and founder of Turnberry Premiere. Welcome, Gerald.
Thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
Gerald, I'm going to kick this off, and I'm very pleased that you're joining us. And prior to our podcast, we were just talking about some of the synergies our organizations have, and we have certainly an interest in actually advancing society in this whole energy transition and sustainability side. So I'll kick this off with the first question. From your perspective, what are the key long-term financial benefits of investing in eco-friendly practices for businesses?
Well, it really starts off with understanding the ESG process, right? Where you have the environment, social responsibilities, and the governance around your company and the globe and society overall. And it really is like a three-legged stool, right? Where each part has to play a strong part. And if there's shortage on any one, then the stool is kind of wobbly, if you will. But, in essence, with sustainability, companies are actually positioning themselves to increase their revenue because, people want to buy from companies that are conscious of the planet and how they're using their resources. And they tend to shop more, especially a lot of younger individuals. They're just focused on, because one, they're going to inherit this planet, right? That we're kind of leaving behind, and they want to inherit a planet that's livable. Also, when you are looking at the benefits of sustainability, it reduces your energy expenses, your waste expense, your material expenses. It actually increases employee productivity and reduces turnover. Because if individuals are aware that they're working for a company that really cares about the planet and they have a mission, they are a lot more dedicated and they're a lot more involved. And so it increases the revenue, it reduces the expenses, which actually equates to greater profits. And because you're complying with certain governmental regulations, it also reduces your risk of exposure for noncompliance.
Yes, thank you for that. I think that's something that we can subscribe to. Often when we're talking to people about this sort of thing, they go, yeah, that's all very well and good, but can you give me some hard examples? So can you share some success stories where companies saw a measurable return from investing in their sustainability efforts?
Sure. For one, my company has done that. Because we've become a preferred supplier to a Fortune 500 company, and they modified our MSA, which said, hey, if you're going to do business with us, you have to comply with these rules of this process around ESG and be able to work. And because of that, we have become we're a small company, but we have become a tier 1 supplier and a preferred supplier to a Fortune 500 company, where most of the guys who are a part of that club are global billion-dollar companies, which I'm not. But by embracing the sustainability processes and getting on board, it's really made a difference. I also think about, I do a lot of reading in this area, and I also think about Usana and Peggy Pelosi, who was the VP of sales in 2000. The company had flat revenues. And what she did is she focused on the social part, which was, it's a health science organization, and she focused on the health part and giving back to an organization called Children's Hunger Fund and getting all the employees involved. In that time frame, within 3 years, she doubled her revenue, she grew the stock price value of it, and she increased the donations to that fund. and she increased employee engagement because, the employees now are devoting their time to a nonprofit and they're volunteering. And so not only are they coming in and giving their heads and their hearts, but they're also giving their hands to the organization. And it actually made a big difference to the bottom line.
Now, that is impressive. Thank you.
Gerald, far too often, when people are going down this journey, they hear about large organizations undertaking it because they have a number of resources available to them. But as you're probably aware, over 90% of businesses are small and medium enterprises. And so we believe that's a big area of opportunity. And so the question for you is, how does the SME market start their sustainability journey without paying significant upfront costs? What would you recommend?
Well, I would definitely say I have actually walked that journey because that's the boat that I'm in, right? And so after I did I think I might have mentioned in our pre-call, a couple of years ago when I really got into sustainability, I was asked by one of my Fortune 500 clients that we comply and we want to be a part of their core supply chain. And so I had to then take some books, do a mind map, really figure out sustainability. And after doing project, program, portfolio management for 25 years, it became really clear what it was all about. So then I started reaching out to different companies. I actually reached out to Watershed, and they basically sent me an email back saying, you're not our target market, you're a little too small. But they gave me a number of PDF files and an email with some more data, which led me on some more research. And I found a company called Greenly, which actually caters to SMEs. And so I started working with them. And not only am I using a service for myself, but I actually became a partner with them to provide those services because it fit within where I wanted to go with my business. And it made it very accessible, where it wasn't like something that was going to break the bank. And two, because I had access to a climate expert who had consolidated and centralized and compiled all this knowledge, and it was based on, just all of their research and insight, I had like a guiding hand as I walked through it. And I know that, it was difficult enough with getting started, but it would have been almost impossible to do it if I didn't have a cost-effective solution and an expert tour guide to walk me through the process. So it definitely is possible. And there's solutions out there for SMEs to get started without breaking the bank.
Well, did you calculate, based on the work that you did, sort of the return on investment by undertaking this process for your organization? Do you have that type of?
I'll be honest, I didn't do like a cost benefit analysis right up front, but I can say, back of the envelope, based on what we paid for our first year of service in comparison to how much business we've gotten from that and how much publicity we've gotten, it would be probably 1,000%, to be honest.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Because it was a 4-figure amount that we ended up paying to be a part of the process and start working with them. But we've gotten back probably a good 6 figures, if not more, if not 7, of just return from this. And again, I didn't do a full-blown cost-benefit analysis, but just back of the envelope, it was significant, the impact that it had on my business.
It sounds like a significant rate of return, Gerald. Good on you, by the way.
Exactly.
Okay, I want to change the lens we're looking through. I'm speaking from the UK, and today we have a long-awaited budget going through government, and there's going to be, what's that going to do? Is that going to encourage sustainability? Is it not? And I may be mistaken, but I think there's a presidential election coming up in the US.
Wait, you're
yeah. My question then is, what role does government policy play in encouraging businesses to invest in eco-friendly solutions?
The government policies play a big role, but here's what I found and discovered, because I think it's not until 2026 or 2027 that it actually becomes more of a law inside of the US. Obviously, UK, Europe, other countries have made it a part of their platform. For Fortune 500s, though, here's the kicker. For Fortune 500s, because they are in multiple nations and they're under the jurisdiction of those nations, across the board within their companies, they're having to comply with sustainability requirements. And because any supplier, whether they're global or not, if they're a part of that supply chain, will also have to comply. And so what's starting to happen is a lot of Fortune 500s are beginning to change their master service agreements with their supply chain members to say, hey, you need to have a carbon-based footprint. You need to do your greenhouse gas. You need to do your CDPs. You need to do your science-based targets. Many U.S., and I'll just speak from the U.S. standpoint, many U.S. companies aren't sure exactly what's required and what's not required when it comes to that, but they will be shocked to realize that once their MSAs are modified, and they have to, that they are going to have to get on board very quickly. And I think this is a really important podcast, any podcast that teaches these principles now, because there's still just a lot of, I would say, greenwashing type information out there when it comes to sustainability, so that organizations aren't really getting and understanding the rigor. And that was the thing that was surprising to me when I really understood sustainability, with being able to meet and fulfill all the requirements around GHG and so on and so forth, that there's a financial component of looking at your financial data and determining your emission factors, as well as your activity data to determine your emission factors, and then educating your employees. It takes it's a little bit of a lift to get there. And companies need to be aware of that and not get blindsided, if you will.
Yeah, you might make a good point there. Part of the work that I get involved in is limited assurance work of ESG reporting. And
Right.
That puts some people off, because you have got to be, basically, and you touched on it, you've got to have the same level of rigor in your environmental data as you do have for your financial data. And that can be challenging.
Exactly. You have to have the right platform. And again, you have to have the right, I just look at as saying it's a tour guide, right? You have to have an expert.
Yeah.
But you can have an expert who is and I use this term, you can either be a travel agent or a tour guide, right? The travel agent says, here's the brochure, have a good trip. Have you ever been there? Well, no, I haven't done that yet, but I've heard it's really nice. Or the tour guide is the one who says, hey, you want to climb Kilimanjaro? I've been there 100 times. I can take you there. It's going to take a year to get started. This is what you got to plan, and so on. So that becomes really important to find that tour guide who's been there, done that they can guide you through the process.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Gerald, in your experience, how does sustainability contribute to brand reputation and customer loyalty over time?
What I have found, so as I started getting more involved with sustainability, I started seeing it everywhere. It's one of those things where, you don't see the red car until you buy one. And you drive up the line, you're like, everybody has a red car. And so my wife and I went to Chipotle, right, for lunch. And they gave me a receipt back, and it had on the receipt the carbon-based footprint for making that bowl.
Wow. Yeah.
Right? Or if I get my receipt back from United or Delta on flights, it tells me the carbon-based footprint of my seat for the trip that I just took. So companies are really taking it serious, especially, travel and food companies. But what it does, it helps win customers. The B Corp certifications and, whether it's the CDP or science-based targets certifications, helps provide that third-party validation that you're not just greenwashing. It also helps you reduce costs, because now you're being more efficient. You're looking for ways to reduce waste. You're looking for ways to build and reuse, right? It helps you manage regulations, and it also helps you attract talent. So from a branding standpoint, companies who are focused on sustainability are creating a stronger brand, because now they have the goodwill, if you will, to out there, that they're serious about the earth and serious about society and an environment and following the law and the processes.
Earlier, you talked about your personal experience with adopting sustainable practices. What are some common misconceptions businesses have about the costs that comes with adopting sustainable practices?
I think it begins with not understanding the process. And it really starts with I would say, like, if you look at it from a project portfolio management standpoint, right? Many companies tend to balk at a PMO or a project-based organization. And yet, when you're adopting those principles, it streamlines everything. And so there are misconceptions that it's going to cost too much, it's going to create red tape, it's going to create more bottlenecks within our organization, when in actuality, it's the opposite. Because when you get real good visibility into where you're creating waste, or where you're being inefficient, or where you're not leveraging the resources correctly, you're able to streamline that process. And what's neat about the sustainability piece, that as I've gone through it now and understand it, especially with getting a carbon-based footprint and baseline, is that when you get to the reporting mechanisms and you see exactly what the corporates are, you know exactly where to focus your attention. So you're not wasting time, right? And it's not I have to do all of it or nothing. Many times it's incremental, right? You're not going to get it all done in the first year. It's like with any good portfolio or any good strategy. It's not all going to happen in the first year. But if you have a roadmap, now you can go after low-hanging fruit, and then you can start working on the areas that are producing the most carbon emissions within your organization, and engage your employees, because it's a team sport. It's not just the C-suite or the chief sustainability officer. It is a team sport where everyone needs to get involved in a part of it. And I think that would help reduce some of the misconceptions around that it's too costly and so on.
Gerald, this has been a great episode on how investing in eco-friendly practices pays off. To end off this episode, what is the biggest takeaway for our listeners?
I think the biggest takeaway is to get started, right? It really is, to get started, because you're going to learn as you go. I equate it to walking down a track in a tunnel, right? The more you keep walking, you begin to see the light. And the more you keep walking, the brighter the light gets, right? And the more you see around you. Because sometimes when you first start doing this process of sustainability and going down this road of carbon-based footprints, it is a lot of information, even with someone who has a ton of experience working in large organizations in complex environments. It's a new vocabulary and it's a new situation. And so it really requires you to move forward. And as you're moving forward, you begin to see more insights, and you begin to see the light at the end of the tunnel of what it's going to require for you.
Great takeaway. Thank you. John, what's your biggest takeaway?
Yeah, I've got two, and they're two things that Gerald said fairly early on. I really liked your concept that ESG is a three-legged stool. I'll be honest, a lot of the organisations that I'm dealing with, they're only sitting on one leg of that stool, and they haven't really thought about the others. And I think the other bit that adds to that, and I like your description of it, you need a tour guide. And I think that is important. And ESG, I mean, people have said, oh, we got the alphabet soup. We used to have corporate sustainability, corporate social responsibility. We got this, we got that. Now we've got ESG. We know ESG is driven from the financial institutions, fine, but it makes sense because it comes from there. And that idea that it is the three-legged stool and you need to work on all three legs, that's my takeaway.
Thanks, John. Dave, what's your biggest takeaway?
I think what I was really pleased to hear what Gerald was saying is that in actual fact, SMEs, this is a no-brainer, and that the return on investment is significant, and that this is coming. Like, it's, even if there's a change of government, it is coming because the world is going this way. So yes. I thought the idea of getting on with it, and that there's all sorts of benefits, and Gerald conveyed just his own personal experience with his company, how he benefited. I think that's a great case study for people to listen. And like John, I think the tour guide thing is a great visualization of how to do this. So thank you for that, Gerald.
You're welcome.
Well, Dave, John, Gerald, thank you for your time today.
That's been really interesting. Enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
That's all for today's episode of the 360 on Energy and Carbon podcast. Thanks for listening. Make sure to check us out on our website at 360energy.net and follow us on LinkedIn at 360 Energy Inc. Tune in to our podcast on Apple Music, Spotify, Anchor, or other listening platforms by searching the 360 on Energy and Carbon. You can watch the video recording and subscribe on YouTube at 360 Energy Inc. Email us your feedback at podcast@360energy.net or comment on our LinkedIn posts. See you next week.